Good morning and welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm your host, Justine Reichman. With me is Anika Sawni. Welcome, Anika.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and chat with you today.
So, Anika, could you just introduce yourself, your title, what you do, and the name of your company?
Yeah, so I'm Anika Sawni. I'm originally from Toronto, and I'm the co-founder of Gruvi, which is a line of non-alcoholic beers and wines.
Tell me, when did you get your 30 under 30? When were you nominated?
Yeah, so I got that in 2021. And so that was when I was 25 years old, about 2.5 years into the business. And yeah, I mean, to this day, when people bring it up, it feels honestly surreal. And I'm like, wait a second, did that actually happen?
What I know so far is that you started this right out of college. You started it with your brother. Is he older or younger?
Yeah, so my brother is 5 years older. So he had already, been into the workforce a little bit. He'd actually taken a year off, was figuring out what he wanted to do. I actually thought that I was heading into the medical field for a while. I studied neuroscience and psych. And as we did that, we started to question that relationship with alcohol a little bit on our own. And as we wanted to transition to drinking a little bit less, we found that there was this big barrier in having an exciting option to reach for.
I would agree. And it's so great for people to have that, especially because I know oftentimes we go out to drink and people feel pressured, whether it's social or self-inflicted, etc. And I'm not a huge drinker, mostly because it makes me tired. So I'm no fun to hang out with if I'm tired, right? Um, so that being said, what was your background, or what was your brother's background before? Had he had any experience in this field or as an entrepreneur, being that he had a few
Um,
years ahead of you?
so he had worked actually at Salesforce previously, but he's always been very entrepreneurial since he was a young boy, like, selling cookies to neighbors and always finding an opportunity to start a side hustle or business. And he studied business in university as well. And then, yeah, and then, this was really the first big one, but he had also done an app that he started in Canada. And so he was a little bit more familiar on the side of what it takes to be an entrepreneur, get something off the ground. So I'm lucky I was able to lean on him a little bit more from that standpoint.
But it must have been scary coming out of college, deciding to do a startup versus having a job. What gave you the courage to do that?
You know what? I think that maybe it was even just my brain, as a young female, but I didn't overthink it. I think that I was figuring out what I was going to do, and like I said, this personal need and opportunity to fill this gap of having an option, of realizing all the benefits that came with drinking less alcohol. And as we started to just dive headfirst, start to look at what was available in the market, understand that, what brand we could really build from ground zero that could be different within the space, that could be fun and energetic and make you feel like choosing a non-alcoholic option wasn't a less than choice. And so I think we didn't really overthink it, but we knew that this opportunity existed for us. And you can always go back to, I think, plan B. So for me, thinking that I was going to go to medical school, it was like that option will exist down the line, but starting this company right here, right now with my brother is, kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity that comes up. And so we just dove headfirst into it.
And so when you're diving in headfirst with him. You haven't started a startup before. He has a little bit of experience, being in the work world, and you have a background in science. So what brought you guys together, and how did you divvy up those roles so that you could each play to your strengths and build a successful business?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And I'll preface too, my parents are a part of the business as well. So we brought them in pretty much at day one, pulled them out of retirement to come help us start the business. And so my brother, like I said, he studied business. He's always had the entrepreneurial spirit. And so he really leaned in, and he loves sales. Like sales is his bread and butter. Like, convincing someone from a no to a yes to take the product on the shelf. Like that's where he really gets his energy rush. And for me, although yes, I did study science and neuroscience, I've also had a really big creative side to me. And so growing up, I've had a passion for photography, for graphic design and art, and just really understanding, how you even build a brand aesthetically and stuff. So from that side, I've really taken off on the creative side of the business, everything from, who our brand is, what the identity of our brand is, how do we build community, how do we show up online, differentiate ourselves in a category that has been so stagnant for so long, and make it feel cool, right? Like, there's this negative stigma that's been around for non-alcoholic beer. How do we make that exciting for someone? And so we've been really good, because my forte is not his forte, and vice versa. And then my parents too, my dad has his training as a CPA, so he was able to come on and help us out from a financial side. My mom, she's like the sweetest and kindest. When someone gets, she's been doing a lot of our customer support. So she gets an email and she's literally like, oh my God, this person did this. And she like knows their whole story and likes to really just kind of give that extra community feel, I guess, to the brand.
That's amazing. I mean, I worked in a family business for years. It was just me and my mom, but it's
Okay.
really a different kind of way to work, right? It's yours. Everybody is invested
Yeah,
and participatory, and it's very different than you starting the business on your own and then hiring employees. Those
for sure.
employees, while they can be passionate and while they can be committed, it's not the same as being part of a family run business. So, what are some of the greatest challenges of being part of a family run business?
Yeah, it's so funny because I feel like this often comes up because people go, I could never start a business with my family. Like, how do you do it? Right. And one, I'm so grateful of just me and my brother, we were 5 years apart. And so we were never at school at the same time. And so starting this business together really did allow us to build a stronger relationship as siblings. And, if I were to look at a world before Gruvi started, like we wouldn't have nearly as strong as a relationship as we do now. But I think one of the hardest things is being able to actually disconnect from your business in some ways, right? Because for me, it's my boyfriend, my mom, my dad, and my brother all involved in the business. And so sometimes I think as an entrepreneur, it's so
That sounds
important to find
cozy.
those moments of balance and times where you do disconnect so that you can show up as your best self. And when it's family, like dinner, then you end up talking about Groovy, and it's breakfast and you're talking about Groovy. And so just creating kind of that space sometimes between work and life takes a lot more intention, I guess.
Mhm.
But overall, I feel like I can't imagine it any other way. Like you said, the amount of trust that I have in my brother, Nikki, and my family, and to be able to just be really vulnerable with them when things are hard, when I am struggling, if I have a mental breakdown, like I have that comfort level with them to just really be real and raw and know that they're kind of going to be able to step up to the plate when needed, and vice versa as well. So for me, it's really been a blessing to. I would have never thought 10 years ago, if you asked me, I would have never thought that I'd be in business with my family, but I am really grateful for it.
I'm sure. And it sounds like it's not only rewarding for you as building a business, but also being able to do this with your family adds another dimension.
Exactly. Not just a family standpoint, but working with my partner and my boyfriend, who I've been with for 7 years, right? And again, for us to be able to show up in the relationship and understand also what we're doing in our day to day work life. Like him and I work in different parts of the business as well. So he's also on kind of the sales side. So I'm not his direct boss always being like, you need to do this and do that. But at the end of the day, we're able to really help each other solve problems that we might have within the business, and really have just a lot more compassion, I think, for what we're doing um, at work as well.
Because you mentioned something, and to me, it would be I would assume, or my takeaway would be, wow, that's a little bit scary. I don't know. Do I want to work for my partner? right? Like,
Yeah.
and then if you mess up or you make a mistake, or I don't know, it could go both ways. Either you're like, oh, she's going to be okay. She'll understand because people make mistakes, or, oh, I don't want to make a mistake because this is my partner, my her brother, her parents. And like, I don't want to
Yep.
look stupid in front of them. So all those things go through their mind. And I'm sure you've had a conversation with your boyfriend or your partner. Um, do you know what his thoughts are on that? Just out of curiosity?
We it happened all very organically, so we actually all moved out to Denver. Like I said, we're originally from Toronto and we moved out to Denver to first launch Gruvi. And so that first summer, my boyfriend wasn't yet fully involved in Gruvi, but again, we just graduated. He was like, okay, I'll come out for the summer. I'll help you out. I'll hang out with you. And of course, if he's out there, well, then here's Groovy and, start knocking on doors and doing, farmers markets with us and all the things. And so it happened really organically because he joined in. He really started to develop the passion for what we were doing as well. And, I don't think that we had this very like hard intentional conversation, but then at the same time, yeah, he was like living with my family all in one house for that first summer. And so I think it's this piece where you sometimes have to just put that ego aside and put that fear of judgment aside and kind of see the bigger picture of what we're doing and what we're building together. And I think ultimately my entire, Groovy team and family is just so behind and so passionate about what we are doing that that's what is the driving force for the decisions, right? It's not about questioning or the relationship or if I'm gonna, something that I do at work affects that. Like it's just about having the open communication and kind of making sure coming back at the same time and making sure, hey, are we aligned right now? Or are you still happy in your role in working for Groovy, and just having those kind of organic conversations on a regular basis, I think is important because things change as well, right? And there might be a point where it's no longer a fit. So I think it's just important to keep talking about it.
Yeah, checking in. I mean, whether it's your family or not, I think you need to check in with, the team, find out how they're doing, how they're evolving, where they want to go. Because I think a lot of times people take jobs because they either need a job or, that's what's right for them in that moment. But then they get curious. And one thing that I really pride myself on is making sure that I know what's interesting to my team so that I can go to them before I go to somebody else to say, hey, do you want to get involved in this? Because you mentioned that this was of interest to you. So I think it's a new paradigm and a new way that we're talking about business often. Um, so now that you guys have built this company and you're moving along and you're doing all these things, when you first started the company, this was a newer market, right? There were people were getting into it. There were some curious elixirs and different ones that are out there, seed lip, and So where do you feel like you came into this space, and what do you feel like you're doing differently?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so again, 6 years ago, there really wasn't many options to choose from. And so kind of Groovy's built on three core pillars. And what we did is a ton of research and just understanding what were the barriers to entry for consumers, right? Like what was making it difficult to make this transition to a less alcohol centric or switching to no alcohol, and what was the consumer really looking for. And it came down to three core barriers in a way. And so the first was taste, and so non-alcoholic beer, like again, it's been around for a long time, really since the prohibition days, but it's always been an afterthought. And so it's kind of been lackluster in taste and flavor. So from day one, we have continuously iterated, improved on our products as well. The amount of change that we've had over the 5 years in business. I'm proud to say now we have gold medals. We got a gold medal for a non-alcoholic lager, which is at the World Beer Cup, the most like prestigious beer awards out of 135 non-alcoholic beers. And for the wine, same thing last year. We just got a gold medal for our sangria as one of the highest rated NA
Good
wines.
one.
And so, yeah, it's my favorite, honestly, right now. And that was the other piece, was this variety, right? So we are unique in that we do beers and wines and sangria, so ready to drink options. Typically, either you make beer or you're a winemaker, you do one or the other. But we really saw this opportunity to be a bit more of a player within the whole category. And that was informed by making it as easy as possible for people to make this transition. And by that, I mean, whenever you have the craving, whether it's, you're going to a game and you want to have a beer, or you have brunch with the ladies, or you have, a nice steak dinner that you want a glass of red wine for, the non-alcoholic option is equally as exciting to reach for. And you're just kind of empowering people to make that decision for themselves. So taste and variety. And then the last piece is making it as accessible as possible. And so we've really done a lot of work in, of course, just having it in stores like Whole Foods and Total Wine and More, as well as online. But all of our wines also come in these, single serve options for the sparkling wines come in the bottles, the sangria comes in a can. And again, this is educated based off of making it as easy in that moment to reach for the glass that you want. So sometimes the 750 ml, and it's just you wanting a glass of wine for yourself, Justine, you might be like, oh, well, I'm not going to open the whole bottle for myself tonight, right? And then you kind of have this barrier to entry versus let's help people make that habit, make that ritual, right? So we've done all the single serve, and then we've also priced it in what we kind of call, sip for every day. And so as I've noticed, the more conversations that I've had with people, it's this direct replacement for alcohol sometimes. It's, when you're going to end the day, pour yourself a glass of wine, start making dinner. And so still having this direct replacement option that is easy and accessible for people.
It sounds, it sounds like it's quite robust. And that does make you stand out as opposed to people that focus on a little niche. And I'm curious, as you're talking about all these flavors and all these different palettes, so to speak,
Yeah.
with your experience in neuroscience, right, and your brother's experience in business, I'm wondering, how did you learn to put together these combinations to create such a robust, flavorful beer that's won gold medals and create this brand?
Yeah, so two things. One, again, that was not our background. We didn't have education in brewing beer or making wine, let alone great tasting beer or wine, right? And so we really had to find partners that had that background, that had the education, different technologies that we could use as well. There's different ways that you can make non-alcoholic products, and that's also evolved over this period of 5 years. And so we've really had to work with partners, different partners on both beers, wine, some of our sparkling wines, in getting it to exactly where we want it. But also, taste is so subjective. And so I was like, who are we, Nikki and I, to be like, this is the best tasting wine that we want to put out there? And so we kind of, again, embraced this vulnerability aspect, and we opened it up to our consumers to actually become a part of our innovation pipeline. And so you'll see some of our cans actually have a big QR code on the front of the can. And so we would brew this small batch, maybe our mocha nitro stout, for example, the first time we were doing a nitro stout on the market. And we put it out there, and people could scan this QR code, and it's a direct feedback loop. Like, what did you like? What did you dislike? What would you change about this product? And then we're able to really quickly iterate and improve and relaunch the product. And so instead of just being like, okay, I think this is good and I'm going to put it out in market, kind of like open that conversation with the community who is looking for this product, right? And so every day on our Slack channel, we get input into, here's the rating that the sangria got right now. Here's what someone didn't like. Here's what they did like. And we are always iterating on our products to this day. Like, even if it's got a gold medal, we're going to improve it as much as we can. So I think it's a little bit of, again, not thinking or getting out of our own way with that ego, and leaning into understanding our customer, their needs and their wants, and being able to deliver on that.
So as you build this brand, and I'm listening to your passion and your interest in really being top in this niche and really growing it, what are you most hopeful for?
I imagine essentially this world where there is no difference between the non-alcoholic and alcoholic like worlds. I think that for so long, alcohol has been very glamorized in society in many ways. And so when I think of drinking, we automatically think of alcohol, right? Like those two words are synonymous to each other. And I think it's about reframing. How do we drink? What does it mean to have a social beverage? And getting into more of these occasions where you can go out to a bar, but you don't have to drink at the bar, right? Or you might go to a bar that's completely alcohol free. And ultimately, we're not going to get away from social occasions because that's innate to who we are as human beings and to bring happiness to our life. So we're still going to want to be social. We're still going to want to have those connections, but alcohol doesn't have to be the means to that end. And so I see us actually celebrating, non-alcoholic options, choices, switching to alcohol free lifestyle or whatever you want to call it. And I think, dry January, I'll bring that up because that's obviously like a hot month where people try non-alcoholic options maybe for the first time, try cutting out alcohol for the first time. But I truly see us actually moving away from just this 1 month, and we're starting to see a bit more of this overall lifestyle switch. And I think it just makes sense, right? We're so intentional about what we eat and put in our bodies in so many other ways. And I think for a long time, alcohol was kind of its own separate segment to that. So it just makes sense for us to be like, what if I am drinking alcohol, what is it? Is it a healthier option? If I'm not going to drink tonight, still ask those same questions as well. What's in it? And I think it's just kind of this inclusion of how we socialize, and alcohol or not, everyone feels empowered to make that choice for themselves.
Do you think that we're going to see bars that solely focus on non-alcoholic options? The same way you go to a mixologist, or you go to a specific mixologist at a bar and they make these amazing mocktails. Are we going to see, or cocktails, are we going to see places that, do you think we're going to see places that will feature mocktails the same way?
Yeah, 100%. I think so. We're starting to see it already happen slowly in some of the, hubs. We're starting to see full non-alcoholic bottle shops come up. There's one right here in San Francisco called the New Bar, and they have the shop in LA. It's completely non-alcoholic. And, you have everything. You have your spirits, your wines, your beers, your ready to drinks, your mixers, all of that. And then again, we're starting to see some actual full bars that no booze offered, right? And I think ultimately what you're going to see is you're going to see both extremes, but you're going to see this diverse menu that's going to show you options. So you might have your cocktail and it might be 0% ABV, low ABV, full ABV. And like, that's how your menus are going to look potentially, right? I think we often look at like,
I already see that in some of the bars here in Marin. There's a new one that just opened in San Anselmo that only sells low ABV cocktails.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I think people are just going to become more intentional about that and request options, right? And I think that's a big piece. 5 years ago, when we were starting to sell into bars and restaurants, you sometimes were laughed out of the store. They were like, no one wants this. People come here to drink alcohol. No one wants the non-alcoholic option. And now vice versa, you have them reaching out to us being like, we want to have options. We want to serve Gruvi at our bar or our restaurant. And we're also trying to make a bit more of an expansion into like venues, right? Like concert venues, these things where you go and you are socializing. Maybe sometimes the social pressures are a little bit stronger. You don't want to sit there with a glass of water. It's not equally as enjoyable or as elevated. And so I think we'll start to see way more options across the board.
So I'm curious because when I think of mocktails, I mean, and the non-alcoholic beers, right? I mean, what a great fit for, so many people, whether it's that you don't like the taste of it, whether you're like me and I just get super tired and then I'm not fun. Um, I mean, up until these were available, I would generally go and I put bitters in my water, in sparkling water, and I felt like I was festive, Um, that was my version. But I do wonder what role health and wellness also plays in this. And if there are any statistics that you're seeing as a result of why people are making the choice to choose to get groovy.
Well, I think there's a few pieces. I think one, there's more and more research, and I, don't have one to quote off the top of my head. But we're seeing, especially the government actually kind of backing some of that research, right? And so I think for the longest time we were told, hey, a drink a day, that's fine, or even a glass of wine keeps the doctor away. Some of these kind of old school myths, right? And now there's a lot more research linking the effects of alcohol to, you know, bodily function, cancer,
Liver
right? Your gut microbiome, your liver. I think a big piece is mental health as well, right? I think we, in my background of studying, the brain a little bit, and actually the impact of alcohol on that, when you drink, it releases dopamine, which is that happy chemical. It makes you feel good. And that's why you're, enjoying the glass of wine. And then you stop drinking and those chemicals are actually depleted, right? And so then you feel almost more anxious or sadder than you did before you started drinking. And it creates this bit of a vicious cycle, because then you go, well, let me reach for the glass of wine so I can feel good and feel happy again and kind of get that increase of dopamine. And so we start to see that circle. And it's hard to get out of that, right? But I think, like I said, we've become a lot more intentional in what we're consuming in many different facets. And even starting to see with Gen Z, like they're the first generation that's drinking less than any other generation before. And I think it's a lot of these factors of just being a little bit more aware, some of the glamorization of alcohol, that barrier coming down a little bit and being like, well, what actually is this? How does it actually make me feel? And I think a big piece is what's coined the term of sober curiosity, right? And so I think for a long time, it was so black and white. It's either I'm sober or I drink. But what if it's like, hey, I don't drink that often, but maybe once in a while I will have a drink, right? Or I'm just questioning that relationship with alcohol and understanding how it makes me feel. When do I reach for a glass of wine? Is it because I had a really stressful day at work and now I feel like I deserve the glass of wine? Or is it because everyone else is drinking at the restaurant and I don't want to feel left out? And just becoming what's called curious to that relationship a little bit more. So I think there's a few different facets of health and wellness that have pushed this category forward. And I don't think of it as a trend. I really think of it as this lifestyle change that people are going to start to make.
I was having this conversation with somebody the other day who really felt like when they drink wine or alcohol, they're making a conscious choice. But I wonder what percentage of those people are not actually making a conscious choice and just, joining the party, having a glass of wine. And while they're making the choice to go out to be social and they're getting that, are they making what kind of conscious choice are they making? Or is this a new conversation?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think that's part of the reason why we launched Gruvi. And for me at university, it was like I never had the permission to even question that. So if I was going out and everyone's like, we're going for dinner, like it wasn't like, oh, am I going to drink? Am I not going to drink? Do I want to? But it was just part of what was happening. It was mindless, right? And so I think this conscious, or what can also be deemed as mindful drinking, is the intention to ask yourself, hey, do I want to have a drink today? Why do I want to have a drink today? And hey, sometimes the answer might be, yeah, I do. I actually want the alcohol today and I want that in my wine. Or it might be like, I actually just want a glass of wine. I want the occasion. I want the ritual and the feeling, but it's not the alcohol that I'm looking for right now. And for me, that's what happened. It kind of was this transition that happened slowly. It wasn't like cold turkey, oh my God, I stopped drinking. But slowly it was like, okay, the more I ask myself this question, the more the answer starts being no. And there was a few occasions where I was at a restaurant and there was no options. So the cocktail sounded interesting. And then I ordered it and then I had a few sips and I was like, okay, the curiosity of the taste is over and I don't really want the alcohol. So I would like pass it to my boyfriend and he's like, stop ordering 2 drinks. If like, I'm not ordering 2 drinks. If you don't want it, don't order it. And I was like, okay, but I had to make that decision a few times and be like, actually, it's not serving me that much anymore. And so I think it was this slow progression versus this, oh my God, I stopped drinking, today or tomorrow. And I think it's just having those conversations where people feel comfortable to make those decisions. I think the hardest piece is when you feel judged or like, like there's a negative stigma around not drinking.
Yeah, and I think because you now have a new option on your menu or a new option in the refrigerator when you go, right? You
Yeah.
get to make that choice yourself, and it feels like it's part of that special category. That category that, like, oh, let's make some mocktails the same way. Oh, let's make a cocktail, right? When people make like a special cocktail for an event or something, you can make a special mocktail for an event, or,
Yeah.
if you really want to have a beer, with your going to a hockey game or whatever game, you can get groovy. I love to say get groovy.
No, exactly. And it's elevated, right? It's not this sweet sugar juice option. It's an adult option. It tastes, and I agree with you, that's the goal. It's for it to taste exactly like your favorite beer, wine. If I blindfold you, you don't know the difference, right? And so again, sometimes you even have a placebo effect from that because it really
Right.
fills the need that you were looking for. And sometimes we aren't actually looking for the alcohol. We're looking for many other pieces or rituals that come and there have now been for so long associated with alcohol, but sometimes it's the occasion, right?
So I love how passionate about this you are and how you really embrace the conversation around conscious drinking, because I think it's super important. And I also I love your story that you did this so organically with your family. And I just want to ask you a couple things because I think that so many of our listeners and our viewers, want to know a little bit more. They want to know, when you built this company, it's a big thing to build a beverage company, and you're doing this just out of college. Did you need to go raise money? Was that scary? What did you do?
Yes. So we did bootstrap it for about 2.5 years to get us off the ground. Since then, we've had to raise money. So we actually just closed a seed round. In total, we've raised about $5 million, which is like a full-time job in itself. But yes, it's definitely been really exciting. And again, we had countless no's. It's not easy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it and be like, yeah, we raised $5 million and it just came like that. Like it was tons and tons of work and presentations. And ultimately the market's been, a little funky as well. And so we actually opened up the opportunity to invest to our Gruvi customers. And so
Oh,
we sent out some emails to our biggest fans because we're like, you guys are there. You love the product already. You love the brand. Maybe there's an opportunity for you to be involved in kind of that next level. And we were overwhelmed with the response on that. So we have over 100 Groovy customers that have now become investors into the brand.
wow.
Um, and I think it's amazing because, we were a small team. We're only like 10, but now you've expanded that team to 110 by having these customers that always have, their eyes open. They're seeing you on the shelf. They're finding new bars and restaurants for you and sending us a message. So that was kind of a pivot that we had to make as we were raising money, and it was deeming more difficult than we expected. And so we kind of made this pivot, and in the long run, like, it's an advantage. I'm so
Right.
grateful that we have these customers as investors into our business.
I think it's amazing because then they're invested in your future too. Every time they go buy Groovy, they're showing their investment again and sharing it with their friends. And there's nothing better than a third party pitch, right? People that love your brand, that are talking about your brand. I mean, that's great. That's the best, I think, recommendation is when somebody says, "I've
Yeah.
had this, you got to try it," right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Right. And
so
it's true and it's real to them. And so they're going to keep advocating for the brand, to their own groups and their own communities. And you get that actual word of mouth marketing that comes to life as well.
So as we wrap up here, I'm curious, you have a bunch of different things. What's on what's your plan going forward? Are you hoping to expand your your SKUs and get more beers, more wines, more, what are you hoping to do in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, ultimately, our vision is really, like I said, to normalize the consumption of non alcoholic options and bring it mainstream, right? And so, right now, we have that great variety. We have 4 wines, we have 4 beers. We're continuing to iterate on those and improve those products as they are, as well as a few new ones in the pipeline. But really, a lot of time spent on that last pillar of accessibility, right? So, getting into more bars and restaurants, getting into what we like to call like making more moments groovy and leaning into that groovy pun that we've been talking about. So, what does it make a moment more groovy is any occasion that you're in, you feel like you have that option to choose. And so we just launched at Ball Arena Mile High Stadium in Colorado, as well as a few of the bigger concert venues. So a lot of the summer is going to be focused on getting into those. But ultimately, getting as many sips to lips, I think that there's still this negative perception in what a non-alcoholic option can taste like. And so I think taste really speaks for itself in just getting it out there and having people try it. And then I think you find that aha moment of how it does fit into your life. It's different for everyone. For someone, it might be all occasions. For someone else, it might be I'd like to have my alcoholic glass of wine and switch over to my Gruvi afterwards. So yeah, ultimately getting to that point where it really does feel normalized to choose Gruvi.
So, well, I'm so grateful that we got to connect. It's been super fun, and I really appreciate your patience with the technology challenges that we have experienced. And for those listening, we will do our best to not make this choppy. But in all fairness, every other word was a little choppy. Let's see what we come up with. And we'll make it groovy.
I love it. No, this was a
And then
great
maybe
conversation.
we'll have a little Instagram live so we can get a little sips to our lips.
Yes, a little conscious drinking. I love it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.